Joining us now on the phone, former mayor of New York City, a man who always makes me smile, Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Mr. Mayor, President Trump monitoring the storm throughout the weekend from Camp David. He has seen 2 Category 4 storms hit the United States in one season, which is almost unheard of. What do you make of how he's handling these natural disasters?
Well, Dagan, I think he's doing an excellent job. I mean, when you consider this wasn't his experience, this wasn't his background, these are about 2 of the best emergency responses I've seen on the part of the federal government. Although I have to say September 11 was quite magnificent in the way the federal government cooperated with the state and the city. This is a really good sign that he's a very effective leader. I mean, this is something that you can't be prepared for until you go through it. You don't know how somebody's going to react to it until they go through it. And in both cases, these have been catastrophic, epic storms, and he's handled them really well. And I have to say, so have the governors. He's had a good, solid state and local law enforcement apparatus behind him as well, both in Texas and Florida.
Now, you mentioned 9/11, of course, Mr. Mayor. Across the country, Americans are marking the solemn anniversary. 16 years ago today, those terror attacks that struck New York City, Washington, D.C., and then in Pennsylvania. President Trump's going to hold a moment of silence at the time the first plane hit the World Trade Center.
Sure.
This morning. He's also expected to participate in a 9/11 observance at the Pentagon. 16 years later, how would you describe the security situation? How much better prepared are we now to protect the homeland?
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? I mean, the fact is that we haven't had an attack, thank God, of that dimension since then. We've had some attacks, but nothing of that dimension. Many have been prevented. Classified information and security being what it is, you don't know exactly the number, but it's in the double digits for sure that have been prevented because of the much better security mechanisms that we have in place now, both in the United States and internationally. DHS didn't exist back on September 11, and we see how active it's been both in natural disasters and the occasional smaller terrorist attacks that we've had. So I would say that we are, in that sense, better off. But then again, this is a very determined enemy, and we're still in that war. It isn't like Pearl Harbor or some historical situation where that's over and the enemies are our friends now. We're still living through the same things that caused September 11, and if anything, they've proliferated in terms of the number of places where these terrorist groups are represented. So we have to remember September 11 because it's not just remembering, it's realizing the reality of what we're facing right now.
Well, and the enemy moving from Al-Qaeda to the Islamic State to ISIS, and the tactics used and the way of the lack of organization with the Islamic State, but again, the proliferation and the indoctrination of those in social media, Mr. Mayor, it's even in some ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, a tougher enemy to fight today than it was 16 years ago.
It is, in some ways it is tougher, and it's tougher to detect. If you're planning an attack of massive proportions, by and large, you're going to leave fingerprints, and you're going to pick it up. But when you're doing one of these attacks where you use the people that are there already, the people in place, you motivate them, you help train them, and you set them off, that's easier for the terrorists to accomplish without being detected. And it's actually remarkable that we detect as many of them as we do. But the chances of doing it diminish. So, and Al-Qaeda isn't has morphed into an organization like that too, kind of competing with ISIS. So ISIS and Al-Qaeda are the 2 larger ones, and then you have smaller splinter groups. So it's a confusing, much more confusing situation than it was back then.
Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for calling on the phone this morning.
Well, thank you. And
I think that
God bless everyone that is going through these storms.
Yeah, and being here in New York City on that day 16 years ago, I think you didn't have to be here to appreciate what you did for this city and how you helped bring this whole country together. So thank you for that.
I had great support. Thank you, David. Tremendous support.